Yo everybody, what's going on? This is Keegan from Kman Reviews bringing you the next episode of Review Recall. This will cover a pretty hefty chunk of the albums that I listened to in March of this year. However, I'm not here doing it alone. I am joined by fellow YouTube music reviewer, BAZZREVIEWS. Baz, why don't you say hello?
Yo everybody, what's going on? This is not Keegan from Kman Reviews. It's Baz from BAZZREVIEWS. I won't hog the spotlight for too long. I'm a fellow man of music too. So if you like my reviews here, make sure you go check out my channel. I do reviews, interviews, and video essays, the like. So it would mean a lot if you check me out. March was a pretty great month of listening. You know, I have some great releases that I'm excited to talk about. Thanks again to Keegan for having me on.
All right, now that that's out of the way, we got some albums to talk about, so let's dive in. For a posthumous rap release, it's actually pretty alright. King Von's verses are pretty consistent, and he still delivers with that signature fiery cadence, but the feature list on here is very hit or miss. But still, I'm just happy it didn't come off like a shameless cash grab. So Dashboard Confessional is an instant nostalgia trip for me. I grew up listening to them, and they're often wrapped up among some of my favorite bands of all time. The ones I praise so much, like the New Politics and the Set It Offs. This is the latest album of theirs, and I enjoy it. Definitely doesn't have the same resonating fervor some of Dashboard's early albums did. Chris Caraba's voice has definitely been affected by age. Either that, or he's just preferring to stay in a lower, calmer register. But it's still a pretty solid outing, and one that I may be revisiting soon. Nice stuff. I don't know if it's me adjusting to the style of Haunted Mound or Cemetery, but holy shit, this is one of the most enjoyable things I've heard all year so far. Man, I was just so damn happy when this album was announced, and I'm still happy after listening to it because I thought it was pretty great. So this is essentially an abridged kind of bonus track release of her last album In the Meantime, but with 2 extra tracks. Why she didn't just stitch them onto the last album and market it as a deluxe edition is beyond my comprehension, but honestly, it's fine. Although the new original I Choose is actually really good, but 85% of this album is just In the Meantime again. I didn't care for that album when it first dropped, and I still don't really care about it now.
We'll start off with Tana Talk 4 by Benny the Butcher. He returned March 11th with his newest album, and regrettably, I think it is a bit of a step back for him. I like how the album takes more of a Griselda ethos with its production, but I think lyrically, Benny just regressed a little bit here. You know, you look at songs like Back 2 Times, Weekend in the Perrys, and 10 More Commandments. You know, there's songs that, with a great lyrical effort, you know, could have been some of the best on here, in my opinion. But of course, that's not to say there weren't any bangers on here. Take a look at songs like Johnny P's Caddy, Super Plug, Bust a Brick Nick, Thugways Revenge, Billy Joe. I mean, they are just some slick, classic Benny material. And in the end, I think Tana Talk 4 proved to me that Benny is just not an album guy. I find that his longer 7-track EPs are far stronger than really anything that he's ever put out that's full length. I think if he had kept the 5 songs that I liked, plus maybe like Tyson vs. Ali or Guerrero, you know, the rating on here probably would have been higher than the 7 out of 10 I'm giving it.
As much as the musical talent is certainly there, and the flows are actually quite enjoyable, this was just so damn corny. Even for someone who enjoys the futuristics, the crypts, the logics, and the NFs of the world, this was just obscenely corny and did not leave the best taste in my mouth. So I saw a bunch of people comparing this to some of the more angsty and aggressive Olivia Rodrigo songs, and yeah, that's accurate, but they're just not as catchy or as good. This is a good album, I cannot deny that. I always enjoy this kind of conceptual wordplay rap albums. They tend to work for me. I do think this one got stretched a bit thin. It's a 70-minute record, and that same style, even with varying features, can get a bit tiresome. But overall, I came away from this pretty pleased. You know, it's alright. Shooter Jennings did an amazing job at producing, helped keep the album firmly in a traditional southern country style without deviating into a more radio-friendly approach. But yeah, I'm actually pretty impressed. I kind of expected it's not like this at all, but it's pretty good. This is like upgraded pop music. Not like hyper pop per se, but just better pop music. And I'm here for all of it. I liked it. I can't say it's the most memorable JR project I've ever heard, but for what it is, it does its job well. definitely a Buble album. Has its nice tender ballads, big band themes, and strangely enough a pop rock jam of You're My First, My Last, My Everything, which definitely took me by surprise, but I mean, I cannot hate Buble if I tried. It was alright. It was two big name rappers sharing their charisma on a tape together. Didn't provide any highlights this year by any means, but it was still a decent listen. Come on, guys, it wasn't that bad.
Next up, we have Who Cares by Rex Orange County. I've been a fan of his for about 3 or 4 years now. He has a really fun and unique style that I really enjoy listening to. But with that said, I do think he's one of those artists that also sounds better in shorter bursts. You know, his singles are great, but once you get to his albums as of now, they have too many songs that sound like it's Control-C, Control-V. And that was not the case with Who Cares, though. I think, you know, I'd argue it's probably his strongest album to date, number one. And sure, the critical score might not reflect that. You know, the lyrical themes might not be any different from what we've seen. But I think the most important takeaway here is just how much more he's matured as just a composer, you know? I think the tracks on here with the instrumentals, they just sound so much more mature and refined compared to anything that he's really ever put out. All 3 of the singles were great, and then you've got songs like Worth It, 1 in a Million, and The Shade. You know, I think towards the backstretch, you do see some notes of sameness on If You Want It, 7 a.m. and the title track, but I still think they have just enough substance for me to brush it off. So whether you've been a fan of Rex for a while or one of his skeptics, I still think this album is worth a listen just to check out his maturity as an artist. I gave this an 8 out of 10.
I like the adventurousness of this album. It's very eclectic, it has fun, experimental moments, but with that comes an inherent lack of cohesion, and the whole theme of the album comes off a bit scattershot in the end. But overall, I did end up enjoying this album more often than not. He literally ends the album with a D's Nuts bar. If that's not indicative of this album, I don't know what is. God, this album was just really good. Very enjoyable, sticky, magnetizing too. I had a blast listening to this. Man, I'm just so impressed with how Devvon Terrell can keep pumping out quality pop-garnished R&B, and even though I barely knew about this record before it came out, I certainly still had a good time with it. Out of all the veteran solo acts, Bryan Adams is one of the select few whose recent material has still really clicked with me. I enjoyed his last album, Shine a Light, a good deal, and this one is also pretty great. I mean, aside from Kick Ass, which is kind of plodding in its pace, but the rest of it was pretty catchy, infectious, and a fun listen. Damn, if y'all aren't peeped in with Cystic yet, I don't know what to tell you except for check this out. It's a fine pop EP. You won't really remember too much from it, but it's nice while it's on. If Taboo did not have such a firm and close place in my heart, this would almost certainly be my favorite Denzel album. I'm still kind of shook after listening to that third track. I feel like I know what's on the other side of like a wormhole. In fact, I'm pretty sure that the song completely knocked me out and snatched my soul for 12 minutes. But damn it, that high was really satisfying. It is not an album that would be held up for Album of the Year by any means, but man, if you don't crack a smile listening to this, I don't know what will. I think the V in Phil V stands for very good because that's what his music turns out to be every single time I listen to it. I'm all for artists expanding and improving their sound, and Ghost is definitely high up on my list for that. They've been slowly evolving more and more into a pop-focused metal style, and I've enjoyed a lot of their recent material, with Impera here definitely being the furthest into that sound. In fact, this album seems to have a lot of influence from 80s glam metal and AOR. It's certainly not as memorable as a lot of their earlier stuff, however, but this was still an enjoyable listen regardless. I can definitely see this causing a bit of a split in the band's fan base, but if you're looking for a catchy, almost nostalgic metal album, I think this might be right up your alley.
Last review I've got for you guys is Charli Xcx's newest record, Crash, and overall I thought it was a pretty great return. The production is super clean this time around, kind of a bit of a departure from that really maximalist deep production that we saw in How I'm Feeling Now. look at songs like the title track, New Shapes, Move Me, Beg For You, Every Rule and Twice. I think those are some of the coolest sounding Charli songs we've gotten in a minute. New Shapes especially. That's all well and good, but I think my problem with this record is that it strays from its supposed path from time to time. Take a look at something like Constant Repeat. It sounds like Charli's attempt at a late 2000s, early 2010s pop hit, and that's all it really is, an attempt. It's not really Charli at her best. And then you've got something like Yuck, right? I mean, it just sounds like a basic TikTok funk song just with Charli's synth work thrown into it. Obviously, they're not bad songs, so to speak, but when you just look at stuff that was on How I'm Feeling Now, or even her self-titled in 2019, I just think it's a little underwhelming, all things considered. In any case, if you're looking for some maximalism to wake you out of this winter sleep now that we're in spring, Crash has all of that and more. I also gave this album an 8 out of 10. And with that, those are all my reviews. Thanks again to Keegan for having me on. Back to you.
It's kind of baffling to me how in the span of 1 week, Roach Mafia can put out one of their best projects with Winter Ops while simultaneously releasing one of their worst with this one. Such a crazy turnaround. It is a solid little folk rock EP here. Never been huge on Donovan Woods anyway. This won't convert anyone trying to get into his music for the first time, but it's alright. I am genuinely impressed how boring this was. Holy shit, the production was so uninteresting. RZA's presence across this was extremely forgettable, and it dragged way harder than any project I've heard in the past year. If there's one thing I'm happy about is that it's only an EP and 7 tracks, because if this was stretched over like 10 plus tracks, it might have made my least favorite of the year list. First Weezer released this year, and it's not terrible. I do like the quaint, almost sweet pop going on here, although I do think some of the classical interpretations are a bit puzzling, but aside from that, it was alright. So this is the third album from the Italian-based symphonic metal band, and honestly, in all sense of the word, this is an improvement from their last album, Lunaris, which while that album did have the occasional befuddling addition to the tracklist, Animus did not really have that, so yeah, this is pretty great. Very good, well done. Lil Durk is probably one of my favorite artists in the more modern rap scene. I think he's very consistent, I like a lot of his melodies, very simple, almost mindlessly enjoyable music, and this new album of his certainly lives up to those standards. I think the closing track here was a bit of an off addition to the track list, certainly not the strongest way to end an album, but the rest of this was still pretty good. I'm sure this will grow on me even more with time like their first album, Hot Sauce, did, but I did like this one even more on first listen, so I have no doubt this will be a K-pop treasure down the road, at least for me. I've seen this record get a pretty substantial amount of love and adoration, which is most likely due to this being the duo's first album in 18 years, and while I do think it's a good record, I don't quite feel the same level of appeal to this. It's very competent, well produced, got some bops on it, but that's really about it to me. Alrighty folks, and that will do it for this episode of Review Recall. Thank you all so much for watching. I want to give another quick shout out to BAZZREVIEWS for being a part of this video. Links to all of his social medias will be in description. And if you enjoyed what you see here, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. All my links as well will also be in the description. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.